Hi everyone! So welcome back to Babble Station. It has been a while, don't you think, Izzy?
Yeah, medyo matagal na actually.
Things have been really, really
hectic.
exciting.
Okay,
is
fine.
the right word for our annual Babble AI to CI. And actually, sa sobrang daming ganap, we wanted to kind of extend the conversation a bit more. Kasi,
Dude, yeah, oo. Kausap ko yung mga nanood before. Like, after yung program, sabi nila, ang daming nabitin sa panel discussions talaga.
actually, even ako, parang I feel like there was a lot more stuff to explore.
Yeah.
And a lot needs to be said, which is exactly why we started Babble Station in the first place, right?
Yep.
So, for that very reason, we have a very special guest with us this afternoon. One of the speakers, actually, at our AI to CI Babble 2023, Miss Ecarma. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For those of you who haven't attended Babble, maybe you can also give a quick intro about what you do.
So I consider myself someone that's in a very small realm or world of music and law. So I started out in college. I took music business management in Mint College, and that's the first college to offer that course in the Philippines. And I think maybe if I'm not mistaken, Southeast Asia. After that, I worked for a bit for a music agency and sonic branding agency for I think 1 year, a bit over a year, and then that inspired me to learn more about law. So copyright, entertainment law, because I was very curious and I felt that there was a need in the industry to have a lawyer that specializes in music and entertainment. So I took law. I recently just graduated after 4 years.
Oh my God.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Congrats.
So I think 3 months ago now, no August, I graduated with a degree in law. So Bachelor of Laws or Juris Doctor. And now I'm preparing to take the bar, but at the same time working a lot with some labels in the Philippines. And I'm also teaching on the side. So in the same college that I graduated from, I do teach music business students, but also I do teach a lot of other disciplines. So I teach for multimedia arts students, film students, marketing. So I teach business law and I also teach media law and ethics. So I guess that's a summary of what I do.
So,
That's actually a very
which of those is your favorite?
Definitely not law. I don't think anyone's ever gonna say that law school was easy. I'm sure you guys know this as architects, but grad school, it's never easy. I guess teaching, I find it the most fulfilling.
You mentioned that you work at Homonym.
I worked in Homonym before,
Yeah, so-
right before law school.
Kasi when I was reading yung background ni Miss Bob dun sa Babble 2023, it says parang Homonym is a sonic branding and audio music marketing. So, gets ko yung music marketing, pero yung sonic branding, parang sa first time I heard about that.
I think that has a lot to do with how brands find their sonic identity. So as Homonym calls it, sonic identity. So like the same way that most brands have their own jingles and you know right away that, oh, that's this brand. Like you, kunwari sa ice cream, dadaan lang yung cart, alam mo na agad,
So
okay,
that's
this
sonic.
is that type of brand. So that's something that a lot of brands have to develop and should develop. And then I guess a lot of research also shows that you're able to engage audiences and consumers more if you have a sonic identity or like a sonic branding, aside from something that's just visual. So yeah, that's another thing that Homonym specializes in.
So, how often do you work with these brands na parang you actually are able to establish their identity?
I used to work with them a lot more often when I was in Homonym. Nowadays, I don't anymore. I guess sometimes lang. But my ultimate goal is just to pass the bar next year. So this is all like what I do in my spare time aside from studying for the
But
bar.
before all the music thing, how
Right.
did you get started talaga with music?
With music, I guess the same way that I think you guys did. I went through an emo phase in high school. College, grade school, high school.
Grade school.
I was really in love with My Chemical Romance and just like emo bands in general. And I wanted to learn the drums. So I did. I think I was 4th grade. I learned the drums. And then eventually when I was in high school, I got into a percussion ensemble or like group and that made me love music a lot more. That's what pushed me to go into music for college. And then in college, I also had a band. We had gigs, like the usual college music life. And then I started working, and then my life now.
But in your college, you mentioned the course was business and music.
Yes.
So why did you choose something that had business into it, not just completely music all the way?
That's a good question. I think really what I wanted to avoid was having to take yung mga entrance exams that were very music heavy, because those are really tough. And like yung mga conservatory, ganon, yung mga music courses talaga, you have to like read notes really fast. You have to be able to sight read. You have to be able to determine what notes are being played just by listening to it. So you have to also kind of have some sense of pitch and like dynamics and scales and things like that, and notes. And I was like, that's not what I want. I felt very early on that I did not want to be in the music industry as a musician. I really was interested more in the behind the scenes. So for a while, I was also managing artists. I was setting up a lot of gigs, a lot of events. And that's really what I fell in love with, is like music, but the industry side of it. And that's also what pushed me to take music business.
Isn't that kind of like a niche? Because I usually don't hear people na that's their target at the very first. It's usually something that feels right at the time, and then it just falls into place for most people, right?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a niche. I think when we graduated, with my course in particular, I feel like 30 lang kami in the whole batch. So for example, in the film industry, you have directors, you have actors, and those are the big like celebrities. But aside from that, you have assistant directors, you have production managers and all of that. So I feel like that's how it is also in the music industry. You have the musicians, the producers, the DJs, songwriters. But then in the back end, you have lawyers, you have people who run labels, who manage artists, who make events.
So how do you feel now that you've kind of done not just that, but you also have your law? How does it affect how you see yung legal aspect of the music industry now?
So I feel like, and that's why I went into law school, as I always felt like law was such an overlooked part of the industry. So a lot of people now, unfortunately, don't really consider law as a big part of it, even though it really is. So a lot of artists don't have their own lawyers. They don't get lawyers when they read contracts, when they write contracts, which is really unfortunate because law affects so much aspects of our lives, not just music, but life in general. And so that's why I went into law, is because when I was working in Homonym, I really saw that there was a need for someone to be like the point person in terms of when it comes to law and music. So a lot of artists did not know their rights. They didn't know their copyright rights. They didn't know that they could get paid if their song gets played in restaurants and things like that. And they're always, I found that a lot of them were susceptible to getting ripped off or abused by other people, other entities. So that's really why I went into law in particular, is to really help musicians and the music industry in terms of the legal aspect. So I'm happy now that I'm in it. I feel like there's a lot to do because everything will involve a contract. Everything in some way will involve some type of law. So really excited to just venture more into that realm.
Yeah, usually kasi yung mga legal stuff, especially when it comes to the creative industry, it's usually just like a behind the scenes work. And I don't usually see people na, okay, we do this, or and this is how you get started. What actually happens behind the scenes? So for example, I'm a young budding musician and I want to put my music out there. I want to have my music play on the radio or have like label sign me. What's the actual first step that people might not know about?
I guess, there's the creative things, but I'll leave it to the musicians. There's so much that goes into composing, songwriting, producing. In the legal field naman, I guess what I feel like artists should do at the get-go is to really have proof and like keep a recording or keep an inventory of the stuff that they create, so that in the future, if ever anything happens, they have proof na I was the one that wrote this, I was the one that made this is my song, for example. That's one aspect. And also, when you start getting attention from the audience or from labels, definitely always have a contract before anything happens, even before you just negotiate with them or talk to them. Even as something as simple as a gig, even if it's just in a very small bar, I'd always recommend to have some form of contract because so much can go wrong. Suddenly you don't get paid or suddenly makakancel yung set mo but you're already there in the venue, things like that. So I think it's really, really overlooked how important it is to have receipts and to have contracts or just any form of agreement with everyone you work with in the industry.
Oh my God. So is it common for example, you don't have proof that you wrote the song? Is it common for maybe labels to kind of play that song and not credit you for it? Is it does that usually happen?
I wouldn't say so much with labels, but I think things happen along the way that you can never tell. For example, if your song suddenly gets picked up by someone, there's a less likely chance that they'll just start recording it and without your consent. But it's also happened in the past. I mean, longer down in the past that there have been artists who have just played a demo or performed a song for someone and then suddenly someone else is completely recording it or turning it into their own song.
So demos, I'm familiar with the term, but I don't really know exactly what goes on about it. Isn't it the type of like a raw recording of something that gets passed around to different producers? So how do you protect that? Since you're also spreading it around, right? It's like a portfolio.
Yeah.
So how do you protect that?
A lot of artists don't think about protecting demos, but it's so important because as I said earlier, nothing is stopping that other person that hears it from just getting it and claiming it as their own, especially because it's not something that's recorded yet or produced or published yet. I think the best way to protect demos, and this might seem weird, is to honestly send people NDAs or just some like message or some contract that I'm sending this to you confidentially. This is my work. Another thing is, I guess a lot of people don't know, but copyright, this is getting very nerdy, very law,
Yes.
but copyright is vested on you as a creator the second you create anything. So I always tell people, even if you just hum a song in the bathroom, that's your copyright now, that's your work. So you don't actually have to do anything. You don't have to go to the National Library or the Intellectual Property Office and have them give you a certificate of copyright. That doesn't really exist because you have copyright over anything you make already from the get-go. But one thing you can do to protect yourself and to protect your copyright is, number one, you can go to those places I mentioned. So either the National Library or the Intellectual Property Office. You can deposit your work and then they'll give you a certificate of registration and deposit. Or some document that evidences that you deposited it to them and they have a copy of it. So that's one way you can protect yourself. Another is you can execute an affidavit that says that you are the artist. So just have it notarized and says that this is the work that you created. Then you can also attach it as an attachment if you want.
Wait, do we have a parang copyright act talaga sa Pilipinas? Aside from yung IP law? Kasi when I hear about copyright parang issues, laging DMCA, isn't that parang American?
Right. So DMCI in and of itself, we don't have a similar law to that as there is in America, but we used to have a Copyright Act, but it got absorbed into the Intellectual Property Code. So now within the Intellectual Property Code, there is a whole section that's dedicated to copyright. So the same way that there's sections dedicated to patents and to trademarks, there's also copyright. So that's where you find everything that is to do with copyright.
But I can imagine yung landscape now is very different from when they wrote whatever act they wrote before. So do you feel like a lot more should be done right now?
I think definitely there's always a lot more to be done, but I think what's more important is awareness, because to rewrite processes and to keep adding to the law also adds more burden to the people that practice it. So for example, copyright lawyers or people in the Intellectual Property Office, the more we add to it, the more that they'll also have to take into consideration and then the more they'll have to do. When in reality, I think a lot of copyright issues can be avoided if artists just knew their rights. And not just artists, scientists, anyone that creates anything. If they just knew that they had copyright and they knew how to protect themselves, then a lot of copyright issues would, I guess, go away or be resolved easily. But there's definitely a lot more to do. I think it's more knowledge and awareness, and then maybe in the future, amendments or additions to the law.
Mm-hmm. So the key really is just awareness for everyone, especially since what really struck me with what you said was the very first thing, that once you create something, there's automatic copyright to it.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't know. I don't think the general public really knows that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like now, parang nasa height na at least yung awareness with Taylor Swift scooter.
Yeah.
Parang yung lawsuit ni Ed Sheeran. So feeling ko a lot more people are becoming more aware of yung copyright music law. Pero parang those people I mentioned, Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, those are people who have the resources to fight for their rights. Diba?
Yes.
So parang an interesting question naman is, how about these small artists that don't have the same level of resources as Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran? So how can they fight for their rights? And minsan, and this is a common case in lawsuits, minsan it's not worth it.
That's so true.
It requires a lot of money, lots of stress. So when is it parang worth it to protect or to fight for it?
Ooh, lots of layers. So first of all, I completely agree. Especially in the Philippines, the sad reality is any case you file, it really takes a really long time. And a lot of times it's not worth it because not only does it cost money to file a case, to pay for the filing fees, you're also missing out on possible work days. So I've had clients that parang, they just tell me, parang, ma'am, it's not worth it for me to continue with this case because I'm missing work just to be here. Because I mean, courts are only open Monday to Friday, the same working hours that any other office is. When you should fight for your rights, this is more of advice I would give. But if you feel that the person that's infringing on your rights is a person who has the capability to remedy it. So what do I mean? I mean that maybe if it's, for example, some small YouTuber or vlogger that's using your song without your permission, you can send a friendly letter and just say, hey, I didn't give my consent to that song. I wish you would have asked me first. Something like that. But if it's a bigger company, someone you know has the capacity to pay you and it's parang worth it naman to go after them and to protect your rights, or you're losing a lot of money by not protecting your rights and a lot of resources, for example, then I would say then that's the perfect time to really stand your ground and fight for it. It also depends on the extent of how they're infringing it. So again, like I said, if it's a vlogger and they're just using it for a travel vlog, for example, maybe not worth it to like make enemies with them. But if it's a big brand and they didn't ask for permission and they got your song for a commercial, for example, that's something that you should definitely fight for. But I guess going back to the first questions you asked is if you don't have the resources to, like what I said, to go to the National Library or to do an affidavit, and completely understand like that those cost money in and of themselves, I guess the best way is to really just keep receipts of everything you're doing. Back in the day, well, I'm not that old, but what they said was back in the day, we would have something called poor man's copyright, where whatever you want to copyright, if it's a CD, if it's artwork, if it's a book that you wrote or something, a manuscript, what you would do is you would mail it to yourself. So there's literally mail it, as in LBC, ganon talaga. So that it says clearly when it was dated, and that it was processed through these offices and things like that. Nowadays, I mean, it also costs money naman to mail things to yourself. So I would say just email yourself, just, I don't know, make a vlog, have all the screenshots that this is your work. And again, this doesn't just apply to music, but artwork, especially nowadays, graphics, films, things like that, concepts, manuscripts, just to have as much evidence as you can collect that says that this is really yours.
You mentioned creators using parang your piece of
during
work
vlogs, right?
So we're getting into the territory of
there's a lot of gray areas when it comes to that. So for example, cover artists, is that okay when
I was gonna ask,
like in talent shows or in corporate events, are you allowed, like when the DJ plays Ed Sheeran, are you supposed to pay Ed Sheeran?
So the general rule when it comes to derivative works is you do generally, I would say, need consent of the owner. But then there are a lot of gray areas, as you said, when sometimes it's okay not to. So in the Philippines, and I think in a lot of other jurisdictions around the world, they have the concept of fair use. If I am a teacher, I use it in my school, I'm just playing it for my students. That would fall under fair use, where I won't really have to like go all the way and message Ed Sheeran about, hey, I'm playing your song.
Then you need a reply
in my class. Yeah. For example, if it's a travel vlog, as we went to earlier, and it's like a 5-second snippet of your song, and they're not wala silang ads, they're not monetizing, things like that, right? Might fall under fair use. But for derivative works, generally, I would always say to get the consent of whoever the copyright owner is. But if you're not using it to an extent, like for example, if you're a DJ and you just play a song, generally that's covered by other aspects of copyright naman. So we have something called public performance rights, where you don't really have to get naman all the consent of every single person. But once it's played, that artist is entitled to royalties for that. So if you go to restaurants and then you see a little sticker that says, this is PhilSCAP approved or registered. That means that restaurant, that establishment is paying PhilSCAP, and PhilSCAP will in turn pay the artists for their public performance rights. So even if you're a DJ, you play that song, generally either the event organizer or the place that you're playing at should be paying PhilSCAP or any other public performance organization, collective management organization.
So another example of music being played in restaurants, what I usually see is people playing off of Spotify.
Yeah.
So for example, Spotify pays their artists, right, per place. But what if the restaurant plays it? Is that still okay? So for example, they have a paying account, meaning they're indirectly also paying the artist. Is that allowed? Or are we only supposed to consume the music of our Spotify account that we paid for personally?
Good question. So 2 things. The first thing is, it's specifically in the Spotify terms and conditions that your Spotify Premium, for example, Spotify Family, whatever it is only for your personal use. That's, I wouldn't say,
So bawal yan.
I wouldn't say na bawal mo i-play commercially. I don't think naman Spotify is like, okay, if you're not doing it personally, then you can't use a Spotify Premium. I don't think Spotify works that way. It goes against their interest naman. The thing is, if you do play it commercially using Spotify, you still have to pay the public performance fees. So you are essentially paying for Spotify and you are paying for the royalties for the artist. Parang you're just paying for the platform na lang na Spotify. But the royalties itself still has to be paid to the artists.
So how do I pay them exactly? So for example, it's a chain restaurant and then we just use Spotify. So how do I give my royalties to Taylor Swift? How can I reach her? What's her email?
I mean, that's a really hard way if you want to go about it. Every single person whose song you play, you'll really just like, hey, I want to pay you. That's really nice, but also a big hassle. But generally, you just go to a collective management organization. So right now, the biggest and I think the longest running is PhilSCAP. And also they're, I think, one of the only ones accredited under, among others, but they're the biggest ones accredited under the Intellectual Property Organization to actually be allowed to collect and to sue. So there have been cases where PhilSCAP has sued restaurants for not paying public performance royalties, public performance fees, because under law, it's, you know, it's due to the copyright owner. They have that right to earn from it. So the chain restaurant should go to PhilSCAP or other CMOs, collective management organizations, have a blanket deal with them. And then I think the best way is maybe to send them, this is my playlist that I played for the past month. So makita na nila, okay, these are the artists, these are the songs, I know how to remit them. And PhilSCAP and other CMOs also have partners around the world so that if, for example, they're affiliated with Taylor Swift's label, they'll just pay the label and the label will pay Taylor Swift. Things like that.
So, nasa terms and conditions. Hindi mo kasi binabasa lobby.
I'm sorry, do you read it? Sige. Ano yung nasa last bullet point?
Yung question ko is, diba, parang another thing na medyo nag-boom is yung reaction videos, diba? So, I don't know if you guys watch any reaction videos. Pero there are those people who react to parang...
It's derivative daw. That's what they usually say.
Kaya nga, may nanonood ng talent show or like music videos.
Tapos mag-go,
wow. Yung iba kasi mayroong commentary talaga which makes it parang, which transforms yung content.
Sometimes they don't.
But sometimes may 2 to 3 minutes na mag-express lang sila ng something tapos wala na ulit.
May times na I've seen some na they're just watching.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Pero it satisfies kasi yung parang desire natin to watch something with our friends. Tapos kung wala kang friends, yun yung friend mo. Pero parang yung argument nila is it's derivative work, they're reacting. you don't get the same enjoyment if you watch their version versus yung original version. But the flip side is they're also taking viewership away from the original creator, and it affects yung revenue na natatanggap ng original artist. So parang where do you stand on that topic? Like, what is derivative? What is derivative?
Right. So derivative works, at least under the law, is any any form of using an original work and then transforming it into another. So if it's a song, it's usually covers. Or you can also do other things like incorporate poems into a song or incorporate lyrics into a book, for example. Those are all derivative works. I also do consider, that clearly falls under that definition naman, to have reaction videos. And it does happen that the reactors sometimes are just more funny or more entertaining than the actual video. Especially, I don't know what's in my algorithm lately, but it's gonna be something so boring, like someone cooking jello, and then the reactor is gonna just react so hard. And I really, I enjoy it. So I think this is not a legal answer, but at least in terms of the market and the industry, I think there's space naman for both. I think it's very sad if ever the reactor takes away from the views that should have been given to the original. But at the same time, you can make the argument that it also leads them to the original. Aside from that, sometimes the reactors also just completely make it their own. In terms of derivative works, that is very difficult. In a perfect world, there would be an easy way where you can say, hey, I'm gonna collaborate on your video, And I know some apps have it, like a duet function, and you can turn it off naman, na parang, okay, I won't allow anyone else to make this into their own work. But I do know that some platforms also give royalties naman to the original artist or creator. I'm not sure if it's the same with videos, but I do know that for music, if you use a song, let's say from a label, in your video, then the label will be notified and then they can ask to take it down. But if not, they can keep it up, but they'll get a portion of, let's say, the revenue that you would have made for that video. I don't know if it does happen, but it should happen for reaction videos as well, or any terms of derivative work.
I think that's something I noticed recently, especially in the social media app, TikTok.
Yeah.
I feel like it revolutionized the copyright scene for musicians. That's what I've noticed. And I think I hear other people talking about that as well. You can see on the side, there's going to be the sound by this person.
Yes.
And then when you click that, it goes to the creator and then you see all the other videos. So it really feels like it's not just a random sound. There is a link that leads you to the artist themselves. So how do you think that type of platform affects musicians nowadays?
I think TikTok has definitely made it really accessible for musicians, and a lot of people got famous because of TikTok. And that in turn leads them to more brand deals, to more revenue, to more shows, especially the younger generation. So I do think TikTok was a big blessing for the industry. And I know it took some time for them to iron out all the legalities, but I do know naman that now TikTok does pay, for example, royalties, performance rights, things like that. So I think that overall platforms like that are really good, especially, as you said, as they lead the people to the originator of the music, which is something that wasn't on other platforms before. So I think it's definitely a good thing.
Right now kasi, I think it's actually harder to pirate the music instead of just actually using the sound itself. Kasi one, it's right there. It's super accessible, the sound itself. And two, sometimes when I try to upload a video with a music embedded on it,
it automatically
mutes, right? So parang...
Even sa Twitch or streaming platforms, before they can just play whatever music they want.
Yes.
Pero if you upload a VOD na merong nagpi-play ng music, it automatically mutes that entire section.
Something pala that I also wanted to talk about while we're on the topic of TikTok. For me, TikTok music or music that got popular in TikTok is a certain type of genre.
Yeah.
That's true.
And I'm not sure if these are just rumors, pero I know some songs they say are specifically made to be TikTok trending.
Yeah.
because of the TikTok challenges.
Yeah, and it's catchy. There's like a repetitive one. And then the chorus is super short.
Those songs are usually the ones na pag kinot mo into a 20-second, it captures yung hook, it captures
Yeah, and then some people say na parang it derails or parang mixes things up a lot in the music industry. So there's only like a specific flavor of music that gets popular. So what do you think of that?
I think, again, like my mindset is always there's space for everyone naman. I guess it sucks if you're a musician and you realize that you made a song that wasn't TikTok worthy or
Super
TikTok
long yung hook.
trending. Yeah, it's like a hook longer than 30 seconds, right? But I think it's always been there naman. The same way that agencies and companies make commercials is you always look to what will hook people on. So the same way that you make jingles for commercials and brands, it's the same, I guess, concept when it comes to what will hook the audience on TikTok. And I think there's space naman for all music because even I fully believe that even the TikTok made music is still bops in and of themselves. They're still good. And surprisingly, there are a lot of songs that get popular on TikTok that, like, for example, Foster the People, which was my thing years and years ago, suddenly back. And I'm sure it wasn't made for TikTok, right? But then, it resurfaced because of TikTok. So I think that there's space naman for everything. And if there are musicians or companies that do require their artists to make TikTok songs, I think let's not hate on them because, if it works, it works. And there's space for everyone. So if you don't make TikTok friendly songs, then you can definitely still get famous on other platforms. Maybe you're more of a YouTube person, like maybe it's better to be played live, things like that.
Hindi ko alam if you guys have on your feed sa TikTok yung guy na that points to.
I know.
Tapos nagko-compare siya na this song sounds like this. Usually si Olivia tapos si Taylor.
Yeah.
So, di ba si Olivia, she sampled. Yung, so on the topic
what is that?
of sampling.
To kind of do a short story on it.
Okay, sige.
So, Sour, Olivia Rodrigo's album, parang super big hit. And it was actually her debut album. So, all eyes were on her. And then, biglang nag-surface na she sampled from one of Taylor Swift's songs. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, after that incident, a few other artists stepped up and said, hey, she also sampled
Paramore
from me, Paramore, and then a few others. And then some were accepted, like Paramore and Taylor Swift. I think they were approved, but I think there were some that weren't. So I feel like that's another gray area in music. Like what qualifies as sampling?
What is considered tipping a hat to another artist, or what's considered taking inspiration versus copyright infringement.
So that's a really good question. And I think that it's always going to be a gray area. Some places, some jurisdictions have tried their best to make it like a formula talaga. So I believe in the US for a while, it was like the first 5 notes are not copyrightable. After the 5th note, okay, pwede na. So if a song has the exact same 5, 6 notes as another, you can, most likely you can say it's infringement. But then if it's like the first 2 notes are the same, then one note is like one minor key, or not key, but one minor half note different, it's still not going to be considered copyright infringement. So that's largely a gray area. But sampling in and of itself, I think it's also complicated to determine what a sample is. Sampling nowadays does have different connotations. But I would always, my old school heart will always compare sampling with actually getting a part of the song, like an actual part of the actual recording, and then putting it into your own song. So I think with Olivia, some of it was sampled, but some of them was not actually sampled, but more borderline infringement na. Because they didn't actually use the actual stems, the actual track. They just made it sound something similar. They used the same chord progression, they used the same pattern, arrangement, things like that. In that aspect, it's still such a gray area. But there's the concept of fair use nga. Has a lot of different factors and elements that I don't even memorize. So that whole thing, that whole issue about sampling and like what is infringement and what isn't, sadly, I would say is always going to be left for the courts to decide because they're always the last people naman to decide any issue. So it's up to the judge or the jury, depending on what country you're in, to determine this song really did seem like it didn't just draw inspiration. It didn't just, it blankly or flat out copied another song. So that would be considered infringement in that
So
case.
would you say it's a case-to-case basis?
Always a case-to-case
She mentioned din kasi na there's a formula, di ba? Like 5 chords. Pero I can imagine na, di ba, there are thousands of possible parang chords or combinations.
Yeah.
Pero there's a parang, di ba, may tinatawag na pop standard na for chords. So if you're an artist, syempre gagamit ka ng chord progressions na parang yung usually sumisikat. And there are cases na, di ba, if you're gonna sue someone, there has to be parang bad intent behind it. Pero what if like I'm just clueless na hindi ko alam na that song existed na pala before?
That's true.
Yeah.
So it's going to be nerdy again. But for the pop thing, I think one of the common progression, I think, is 5-4-1. So that's a chord progression. But in terms of intent especially, so focusing on intent, in the law, the copyright law kasi, or the intellectual property law is considered a special law. So generally, intent does not matter. Meaning, if you did it, if you infringed, you can't say, I didn't know. Although, syempre, it still factors into how overall it's considered and perceived. But generally, if you violate a special law, it's called malum prohibitum as compared to mala in se, meaning you don't care about intent. If it happened, it happened. The same way that if you are caught, for example, with dangerous drugs in your belongings, you can't say, I didn't put that there. I have no idea who put that there. The mere fact that you have it in your possession is considered violation of the law, as compared to, let's say, other things like, let's say, theft. Parang did you actually have intent to take it away, or parang nilagay mo lang sa bag mo accidentally? That's when that comes into play. But I guess, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but intellectual property violations are generally, they're special laws, so generally intent does not matter. So sadly, it can happen. But when it comes to pop kasi, who can really say that the 541 is their creation, right? Baka it was something that was made long ago and now it's in the public domain. So if you're sure that that work is yours, then for sure fight for it as a copyright owner. But I don't think anyone nowadays would be like, hey, I made the 541 progression. I deserve all the credit for all of it. Yeah.
Nakikita ko dun sa movies, like one of the dramatic scenes, especially pag artists, is I have the napkin where I have the original notes. Tapos yung napkin na to may stamp ng whatever restaurant that doesn't exist anymore. So totoo talaga yun. That is your proof.
I wouldn't say proof. Proof is conclusive na kasi. It's more evidence. Proof is parang how they appreciate it.
Speaking of pop, I just want to know yung take ni Bob sa P-pop. Kasi there is this parang string of P-pop that's heavily parang inspired by K-pop.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that specific genre right now?
At first, honestly, as also a K-pop fan, at first it was something that I was hesitant about. But honestly, the second I heard good music, na P-pop, I was like, okay, my mind has changed. So I think before, I won't name names. I don't even know actually. I don't remember what I heard na P-pop dati na hindi ko nagustuhan. But then when I hear P-pop now, like SB19, for example, or Beanie, I love Beanie.
You love Beanie.
I love Beanie. So things like that. I'm like, this is actually good music. Whether or not they copied off of K-pop, whether they were K-pop inspired, in and of itself, it's a bop. It's a banger. I will die on that hill that I love Beanie and P-pop is good. I think it's also difficult naman to say that we are fully copying K-pop, because K-pop in and of itself, if you trace the roots, they also copied from Western pop. But now P-pop has really become its own thing. And the music is good, like flat out good, and the artists are great. So fully support K-pop. K-pop, P-pop, P-pop.
Kasi there are people na parang purist na P-pop, that's Ben and Ben. Sino pa ba?
Juan Carlos.
That's Juan Carlos. So sometimes when I hear parang these new P-pop bands sing something, I don't hear yung Filipino eh.
Right.
Maybe that's just me. Pero,
Filipino.
which is also kind of subjective din naman based sa experience ko. Pero I can easily tell this sounds like a K-pop song or this sounds so Western.
Honestly, kasi before, I was kind of in that side na, okay, this is what I think. No, not necessarily a hater.
Parang cringy lang siya.
No, no. I won't cancel myself here. Well, it's kind of like I was appreciating kasi I think maybe 10 years ago, we already have P-pop na super defined. It was Hale, Rico Blanco.
MYMP was famous sa Korea.
Oh.
So famous na kinover. Isa yung MYMP sa inspirations ni IU. Yeah. And when she went dito sa Philippines to have her concert, she sang yung isang kanta ng MYMP. So like, sumika talaga yung MYMP sa ibang bansa.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, it feels like we were trying to already establish yung traits of Filipino music. So it's, I guess for most people, it was kind of just surprising to have musicians go from, we're making it sound a little like medyo K-pop or medyo Western. Pero at the same time, I'm also thinking, even in Western music, there are different genres that don't sound like Western music or our definition. Even in K-pop, there are songs by K-pop artists that don't sound like the typical K-pop song. So I do agree with like the fact that we shouldn't really box them into one genre. And yeah, basically P-pop is music by Filipinos.
How would you define original Filipino music or OPM?
May definition ba in the first place?
There's an organization called OPM also. So I used to work with them in the past year, and so I did like hosting events for them. And what we discovered is the term OPM actually came to light during Manila Sound. So the culture of Manila Sound, that means like hot dog, apo hiking, DST, exactly. That was originally associated with OPM. So that's when that term OPM like came to rise. And then later on, we had, yung mga very senti things. And then that was associated with OPM. And then when we had people like, let's say, Ben and Ben, JK, Zach, now suddenly that was OPM. And now we have SB19, Beanie. And suddenly they're OPM. So I think OPM in and of itself just means music that's originally created by Filipinos. And I think that's
Filipino.
Yeah. So
no, but question,
original
for example,
Pinoy music.
Before, when Jessica Sanchez won she didn't win.
Second place.
Sumikat siya.
Yeah.
And then she released a song with Neo, but I forgot.
I think that was Neo.
She is Filipino, pero is that OPM?
Is that OPM?
I would say yes. But OPM is very, very subjective. I don't think there is one category of OPM the same way that there's a category for jazz and hip hop and rock. I think a lot of people think it's a genre. It's not really a genre. For me, it's not really a genre. If you want to classify it as a genre, then I think it would be the Manila Sound nga of the. I mean, for me, historically, that would be the true OPM, quote unquote. But honestly, whatever is created by Filipinos, I would find this OPM. OPM is
go.
OPM is
This is
you
like
wanted to ask this question
anime. No,
yeah.
Is it just anything that is a Japanese made animation?
That's
true.
also on the topic of like who watched the Oscars complain, why is animation a genre? It's not. It's not a genre. It's it's a medium.
Yeah.
So I think OPM is kind of similar to that. Na it shouldn't be classified into one thing. Like animated movies aren't supposed to be just exclusively for kids. They can tell horror stories. They can tell adult stories.
Agree. The same way K-pop, like nowadays, it's like as you were saying, K-pop sometimes doesn't sound like K-pop. So when you associated K-pop in the past, there had to be some level of Korean words and then some English words. And now you have XG, my fave, who completely, fully just sings English, raps English, and they're from Japan. But they're still considered a K-pop artist. And then Somi's recent song, it was like very, very house, right? And when I heard it, I was like, this is house music. This is not K-pop. So K-pop, I also think, is just a bigger, broader thing. The same way that OPM is a broader thing. And then you just have genres, actual genres within it. I remember the first time I heard ESPA. I was like, why is there EDM? Like a full-on EDM break in the middle of, I think it was Savage or something. I was like, yeah. And I was like, well, I guess this is still K-pop, right? The same way that you can consider anything OPM, I
There
think.
are people who would say na XG Saw Me is actually closer to 88 Rising.
Right.
Their music is closer to 88 Rising. Similar to yung Careless label ni James.
Yeah.
Parang the music you hear there is parang more similar to this Asian, East Asian parang genre kaysa sa typical Filipino music.
Yes.
Wala namang place where you have to put OPM, right? Parang people are just labeling them.
The only times that legally, the only thing I can think of that would actually be strict on labels is if you have a trademark. I think it's called a collective trademark. So, for example, I think it's like tequila, right? Yeah, tequila. It's only considered tequila if it was manufactured in Mexico or something like that. Only made with the blue agave plant, something like that. But there's only a few times that we can actually be strict on things, and that usually comes with manufactured products. When it comes to genres, like, I feel like it's really all subjective. I mean, you can get into the nitty gritty of it. So, for example, in music, to consider something Motown has to be a certain BPM. So you can get to that level of parang being that nitpicky about, is this pop, is this EDM, is this whatever. But I think generally it's just a way for people to identify things in a way that makes sense to them. It's a way for Netflix to recommend things to you or for Spotify to come up with the radio. But to really be very strict and say, this is not that. I think it has its place also. But most of the time, it's not something we should be very, very strict about naman.
I remember yung song ni Lil Nas X, yung
the Old Town Road.
We
Yeah.
were debating, should this be a part of the country chart?
Yeah, and like, can we even nominate this?
I feel like the reason people are getting more sensitive about yung boxes na to, like what is Western, what is K-pop, what is P-pop, is also nagiging mas sensitive tayo when it comes to appropriating culture.
Yes.
Diba? Yung height of...
I agree.
So,
Isn't that like a wider topic to begin with? It's not just something that happens in music. But
very
socially,
true,
parang
very
appropriation is super common na. Which, for me, is a long discussion to begin with. Kasi some people, for example, if tourist ka sa Korea, tapos you wear
The hanbok.
Hanbok.
Yeah. Like, because you want to dress the part. You're in Korea, you're appreciating the culture. Is that still appropriation?
No, it's funny. The first people who are getting offended are the non-Koreans.
Or the non-Koreans, yeah. And most of the time, it's like that.
Pero you mentioned that you like K-pop, diba? So I have to ask, which groups do you listen to?
My top is Mamamoo. And then in my heart forever is Red Velvet. They're what got me into K-pop. So I was like very third gen na. And then now it's XG. Like, I honestly, whatever they're classified as.
So sa fourth gen, you go XG.
Yes. Okay. But everyone's been hitting naman talaga sa fourth gen. Like, I've also been really into Les Seraphim. I didn't like them at first, but now I'm like, okay, I really like their music. So yeah. But my OG talaga Mamamoo and Red Velvet.
Ikaw?
I'm sorry. I'm just...
No, naki-K-pop ka. You dabble.
Okay. This is exposing Izzy as a K-pop stan. But at the same time, I'm just learning off of my fellow K-pop stans. We have Marks at the back and then Izzy as well. I'm mostly just learning from them. And it's nice kasi I usually appreciate other cultures na music. As well as, of course, yung Western. Culture! Or Japanese, J-pop. Usually, I'm more into J-pop or Thai music. But...
You don't like P-pop?
That's another thing. I'm saying music outside of what's locally, like what's from local. So I listen to, of course, Western because it's everywhere. There's J-pop, Thai. There's I don't dabble much into K-pop. Mostly because I don't, ang daming ganap most of the time. So I just feed off of, listen to this. Ito yung music video nila. Tapos ito yung
K-pop recently.
So, Honestly, Le Seraphim. I like the videos. We were talking about it earlier. We were watching. And then they were explaining to me, okay, so ito yung bias ko.
So that's why yun dyan should be your bias.
Yeah. Like halfway convinced. Pero I still need to do my research.
Diba? We need to listen to it 24/7. Plus we play it sa office para lahat kami maging K-pop stars.
It's brainwashing.
Eugene's is so good.
Another thing is, before, I think in like first to third, second gen, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, parang usually there's a certain group of people lang internationally that are K-pop fans. But now, I think everyone knows New Jeans. Yeah. Everyone knows, example, BTS.
Everyone has at least one K-pop song.
Everyone knows at least one K-pop group. So, I think that also plays into the fact na medyo na-influence na rin sila of international like appeal. Para I feel, don't you think medyo nag-change na rin yung K-pop music as a whole in response to having a wider audience or having more reach?
Like sa groups, you have to have at least one person who speaks English, one person who speaks Japanese.
Requirement ba yun?
At least one person who speaks
Lately,
Chinese.
Multilingual.
Yeah. Hindi ko na alam saan papunta tong convo na. Nagtatanong man lang ng recto.
Kasi you guys expose yourself as K-pop stan. So I'm just like trying to feed off.
Who do you stan naman, Izzy?
I stan, oh my God. So originally, Twice.
Aww.
Twice talaga. Like, hanggang ngayon, si Jong yun. But now,
I love Sana.
But now, yung music na pinapakinggan ko is what you call NPC music. You know
what is NPC music?
Whatever's famous sa radio. That's my music. That's what I play. Kaya nga sobrang funny kasi I make K-pop stan, pero pag tinignan mo yung Spotify rap ko, andun pa rin si Jack Tabudlo. Hindi siya matanggal.
Are you saying you're basic?
Yes, I am proudly basic, and everyone who plays basic music should not be ashamed.
Yes.
Totoo naman. Kasi there's a reason why they're famous. Diba? Because it works.
Yeah, because it's good.
A lot of people say, for example, Taylor Swift is basic. Especially before super appreciated siya. A lot of people kind of hated Taylor Swift fans. Oh, you're basic. You listen to Taylor Swift or Ed Sheeran. But there's a reason why they're good. There are levels to being Taylor Swift fans.
Yeah. There's the basic fans. Tapos when you move up, there are people who dance at theater. Watching the Eras tour.
Where are we going with this
In full attire with all the friendship bracelets.
So where are you?
That is an attack.
Where are you sa spectrum?
That was a read.
So from on a scale of dumadaan lang sa Spotify like playlist versus
sumasayaw sa theater. Malapit ka dito, I know you.
No, I'm not. Okay, I watched the Eras tour.
Pumila ka for tickets. I mean like online.
Pumunta yan sa March.
Yes, I am.
So you are there. You're there. You're fully there.
Okay, to be fair.
How much are you spending?
I feel like a lot of people are going just because they appreciate her. Wala namang and they have the means. Okay, so for example, like, some people have the means, tapos they're a fan, tapos sakto, they wanna go to wherever country they're going, Japan, Singapore, Australia. Some people are going to Australia. Why not? Diba?
Yeah.
I mean, I go to concerts na hindi naman ako yung super, super hardcore fan
so
of.
We're just asking us.
Hindi kasi
there's no attack, there's no anything.
There is an attack because you called me a part of a cult. So parang essentially, that was, define attack.
What is a cult? Let's define a cult. I'll define an attack.
We need to change the subject.
We have to switch back sa law. So, what's your opinion of Taylor re-recording her songs?
I think that was a really smart thing to do. Like, super duper smart thing to do. And I think I was reading recently na parang si Kelly Clarkson actually was the one that recommended it to her. So, first of all, it's legal. I think it's not something people think about because most labels, if you assign your rights to them for songs, it's theirs na forever. But some of them might have parang stipulations na you can only re-record after X number of years. So I think that everything is really brilliant in terms of how she's going about it. Na she's really making it public, na she's really re-recording. Such a smart way to get the rights back to your own songs, basically. So I really kudos to her for that.
Is it possible, since in Taylor Swift's contract, I believe, or some people believe that like there would be a statement that says you can re-record this after certain X number of years. Is it possible for a contract to say you can never re-record this?
It's completely possible. That's why I really tell everyone you have to read your contracts in full, even if it's like 50 pages long. Yeah. And that's something you're all free to do naman, every single person. I think people don't know this, but you don't always have to take a contract for what it is. So that's something that everyone under the law has the ability to do naman, is to really freely contract with another person and to negotiate on your own terms. So you can choose not to sign something, but you can also definitely choose to negotiate the terms of the contract.
I have to ask, kasi as a lawyer and a musician, how do you feel about consuming music by an artist who has done some crazy stuff? Like,
parang the art versus the artist, the debate.
I've always had mixed feelings about it because I guess people don't realize that so much goes into music that's not just the artist itself. And I feel like a lot of the pop artists who are very cancelable, most of the time they don't write their own music fully. So what people don't realize is like 2%, 7% of their royalties go to a ghostwriter. Not necessarily a ghostwriter, like a writer, a producer, arranger, composer. So I feel bad knowing that you're also, by boycotting an artist, in a sense, you also end up restricting some of those earnings to people that did not do anything cancelable. But at the same time, it does send a message, and it does really stifle also the income that artist will receive. So I'm super on the fence about it. I guess it's more just like, I know in my heart that other people will be affected, but I know that the artist will also be affected, and that's also the goal sometimes. So I really don't have like a say in it talaga. Since usually
that's
basically it. So would you say cancel culture is in a way helpful?
Yes and no. Always a gray area, but I think it has its time and place. It is effective in getting important messages across. For example, the Me Too movement was so powerful and like bringing light to things that were happening in the industry that no one wanted to talk about. And there really are some people who I think did deserve to be cancelled for the things that they did that no one had the courage to talk about. But I think the difficult side about it is that people do get cancelled, or things do get cancelled, quote unquote, for something that's not often true. So there's also a dark side that when you make allegations, yun nga, allegations lang talaga sila. And sometimes that person ended up not actually doing whatever people thought that they did. And sometimes they actually did. So it's very like double-edged sword talaga. That it has its time and place, but unfortunately, there's some collateral damage to people that should not have been cancelled, quote unquote. And I think it also really depends on people's sensitivities, because in the field of law, it's always you're innocent until proven guilty. So I feel like if people did really, when it comes to cancel culture, I would always say, then file a case, and then let that happen. Let them get what they really deserve if it really did happen.
Basically, it's good to know kasi what you can do or what actions you can take when something is not being done right, whether that be through copyright or infringement, or parang when someone does like questionable things, there's always an action to be taken, whether that be parang informal action or parang formal action, like kailangan ng aware tayo of the law. essentially.
Right. And these days, hindi lang law yung dapat aware tayo, diba? We have to be aware of the trends then. And one of the things that has gone up in popularity and usage is AI, diba?
Right.
Which is, we called up the Avengers nung Avengers of AI regulation nung Babble. AI to CI.
Wow, that is a term. Avengers of AI regulation.
Kaya yung poster.
It is. Diba, I told you, it looks like the Avengers poster. Maybe we can like stream it here if you're watching in video. Sabi ko, wow, dream team naman. Oh my God.
So yun, AI in music, how do you see it affecting the industry?
I think it actually has a lot of benefits for the industry. And I also talked about this in the Babble event, is that when we think of AI, there's often a negative connotation in terms of music because you're like, I can't believe AI wrote the song. I can't believe AI replaced the artist or the songwriter. You're so lazy. You got AI to write your song and things like that. But there's a lot of processes that happened in the back end that can be just super streamlined because of AI. So a lot of the things that are difficult for people, for example, to upload a song on Spotify, you need to have the metadata, the lyrics, the cover art, and you have to like ingest those into systems. AI could easily do that and help more people create more efficiently or just optimize the things that they do. And as I said also, it really is making music more accessible to people. So for example, for me, I write lyrics but I can't sing talaga. I can get AI to do a mock-up of how I want the voice to sound and then give it to someone and then just say, okay, listen to the one that I made. You can sing over it or just copy the voice that AI did. Or if I have a song and I sing but I can't produce, I can't make beats, I need a drum track and it'll be expensive for me to hire someone or I can't find someone that's willing to do it at that time, then you can have AI make the song for you, the backing track, the melody and things like that. So I think AI has its place talaga in the industry and I think we should not villainize it but just realize that it has so much benefits in making things more efficient and accessible.
Pero I can also see it being used in a parang more negative manner,
right.
Na like you're using another person's voice to sing, that you're selling it as your own.
Yeah.
But won't that count as derivative?
Only if there's their consent. So that's actually really interesting because recently in the Grammys, there's this one song that got really popular, I think on TikTok and in social media in general. I think it was written by a ghostwriter. That was the name of the artist. And he wrote the song himself. He produced it himself. But the vocals, he got the AI of Drake and The Weeknd. And then the Recording Academy of America, I think, opened submissions for works that contained AI. But then when he submitted his work, it got rejected. But it turns out it didn't get rejected because of the AI. It got rejected because he was using the likeness of someone who did not give their consent. So obviously Drake and The Weeknd didn't give their consent to that. And he is benefiting off using their voice. So I think AI does also do damage, but then artists can definitely use AI to their advantage. So I think Grimes licensed or has allowed her voice and likeness to be used in AI as long as she gets a cut out of it.
Black Mirror.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the everybody hates Joan or something. Yeah. So I guess they're definitely derivative works, but artists also have the capability to give their consent naman to using their image and likeness.
There's also another instance of music playing a part in AI na super nag-trending recently. I forgot who like specifically na artist, but there was this music video na it was completely done in AI. As in, it's kind of like a jagged video. Tapos it's kind of like turning into an anime style. Tapos they were kind of doing it frame by frame. Tapos some people were not a fan of it. Na parang, you're doing it the easy way. And another thing was that's also taking away from animators who were actually hand drawing or manually doing it. But at the same time, there's also that side of people na, you're innovating or you're creating something new with the AI software that we have. So is it actually ethical to do something like that. Kasi in a way, you're taking away from creator or other creators, but at the same time, you're also creating something new.
I think recently that was also an issue. I believe it was for Linkin Park. I'm not sure, but they also came out with the album art naman na AI generated. And a lot of people also were angry because you took away from people, graphic designers, people who could actually design your album art. So for me, I think that, again, as I always say, there's space in the industry for everything. Because AI art in and of itself is still art, I would consider, if you get the right licenses, if you have the right consent. There are people naman who have their own AI algorithm that they get consent from people to put their drawings in or put their artwork in. And I feel like that's completely fine. That does come up with really interesting and aesthetically pleasing products in the end. So I think there's space for both. I think that it was unfortunate that these people weren't hired to make the music video, but that doesn't mean that they'll never be hired. Right. As long as other people in the future keep making music videos or album art using other people, like the work of other people. So I guess it's sad, but it's also not possible to do everything anyway. Like if I am a graphic designer, I can't make everyone's album art in the first place. So I won't be for me, I wouldn't be extremely pressed. Or even in the field of law, I wouldn't be so mad if someone said, I made my contract with AI. I'll just review it and be like, hey, it's a pretty solid contract actually.
How about in law? What are the other possible uses of AI? So
we use AI a lot for research because I think sometimes it's more efficient than Google, honestly. But we always cross-reference it because AI is not perfect. There's a lot of times that AI gets things wrong. So we use it for research when we're drafting pleadings, things like that. Sometimes you can have AI do something very simple, like draft a very simple contract clause. So if something as simple as selling like a deed of sale, you can look online for templates. You can also ask AI to make one for you. So when it comes to simple things like that, that's what I would say, use AI for. But at the end of the day, it never is fully AI. It'll always go through some human thing. For me, it's mostly checking if the AI did the right thing anyway, and just using AI to help me out.
Are you never afraid of AI eventually displacing your profession?
I don't think so. In Babble also, one of the speakers who actually is a lawyer said it very well, that AI can never do certain things like consider circumstances humanely. So AI can't talk to, let's say, a victim of a crime in a way that would, actually get the correct responses and answers off of them. I don't think AI can do cross-examinations. I actually think that as lawyers, it's okay for AI to replace some of the stuff that we do because mostly that's stuff that we don't want to do anyway. So yung mga honestly boring or things that are very, very tedious, that are very repetitive.
That's the same position we have for architecture. There are a lot of things na pwede mo naman ibigay sa computer.
Yeah, but people get mad. Parang, why are you doing it the easy way?
I know.
Yeah, and so but I agree. Like, so what if it's the easy way if it gets the job done correctly? And yun nga, parang even as an architect, in your good conscience, even if you have AI do something, you won't just submit it to the client right away and not take a look at it. So I think as humans, or at least in the legal profession, we'll always be there to correct AI's mistakes and to focus on things that matter more, like meeting with the clients, like cross-examinations, like appearing in court, and maybe things like pleadings, drafting contracts, because some of the time it's exactly the same thing. Paulit-ulit na lang siya. Are things that I would happily give to AI, but I'll check anyway.
In every big Babble, kasi hindi din naman alam anong i-expect namin. Especially this event, iba-ibang industries sila. Before we take someone, pero within architecture, design. So alam namin na, okay, the topic's gonna be this, tas his opinion on this topic is gonna be this, kasi we're all architects here, we're all designers here. But this event specifically, hindi namin alam kung ano bang will the guests see eye to eye on this topic. And yung minsan na nilolook forward ko is if may controversial takes ba on stage. Or,
tapos hindi nag-agree, like polar opposite opinions.
So the question is, since tapos na rin naman yung Big Babble, is there any parang nasabi yung event na naalala mo which you don't necessarily agree with, or maybe nag-strike sa'yo kasi you agree with it strongly?
Or it changed your perspective in something?
I think lang the use of AI in general really, really changed my perspective. Because like I didn't know it could be used with fashion, for example, or how it's used in magazines and like cultural heritage preservation, things like that. And psychology especially. I was like, that's so interesting. But definitely, not that I don't agree with it, but definitely one thing that really struck me was the talk on psychology na parang AI can essentially headhunt for the next CEO. And I was like, dang, like that is kind of a scary reality that HR can be outsourced to AI, and who will AI pick, right? Like without like looking at candidates objectively without really knowing them as a person. Things like that are like really interesting and I feel are kind of scary also in the future.
So totoo pala yung sorting hat. Pero yun pala yung AI before sa Harry Potter.
Pero how was your first parang Babble experience?
It was really good. I didn't know what to expect also. And then, sobrang nabitin ako as in at the end. Like, lahat naman kami. It's such a nice avenue to be able to talk with people from extremely different fields and just to share knowledge. And for the most part, I was really just learning more than I was like speaking and giving out information. Like, I just kept learning talaga. And it was a really fun experience in general. Like, how everything was laid out. Ang dami kong binili. Sobrang nabudol ako for no reason. Parang lumabas ako ng 3 yung bag ko. Parang bakit?
Umali din ako ng bag.
Sabi ko parang nagsasalita lang naman ako dito. Parang ba't nabudol pa ako? So I think it's so fun. No, 3 talaga. And then, so it was my original bag. Tapos the new bag that I bought from Baybayin, right? And then yung pamigay na Babble bags.
Yeah.
Parang mukha talaga yung tanga. Parang like, lumawas ako ng bahay or something. Parang ito yung bag ko.
Parang ka nag-overnight.
I know.
Bye-bye, baka naman.
So, yeah. It's just fun talaga. I mean, aside from the talks and everything, just the fact that you get to, yun nga, parang connect with people like this, in a way that will reach past the event. Because I feel like for some events, it just stays there. But okay, you meet people, you connect, whatever, then you never speak to them again. But after that, like, I'm still talking to some of the panelists that I met, we follow each other on Instagram, things like that.
It's really nice kasi parang this is the first time na we took people from super different na industries. Kasi before, Babble used to be like graphic artists, architects, interior designers. Pero all of them kind of tangent pretty closely to architecture. It's the first time that we have law, music in the talk itself. I feel like Babble, this year especially, as well, parang over time, we're really trying to develop it into a festival. And I think that's a good thing. Especially now, for example, this is also in a way an extension to our annual Babble na we're trying to share as much information as we can by providing as much information or entertainment to like as far of a reach as we can. Kaya thank you so much for joining us na you were able to, especially for those who weren't able to attend our annual Babble.
I think yung one of the major takeaways na nakuha ko ng Babble is always parang every representative, they always talk about yung future of their specific industry. So for you, what do you think will be the future of music in the country or AI in music in the country?
I think that the Philippines has always been very technological. If not, then very madiscarded tayo. I always come across some sort of AI cover on whatever social media I'm on. So I said nga, recently I heard like Willie Revilla Meg, Jessica Soho doing OMG, yung mga ganon. Yeah, or doing dati-dati. So I don't know. I live for it. I love it. I know that we're witty. We think outside of the box as a people anyway. And we're so quick-witted talaga when it comes to these things. So I think that we'll also be able to use it for the right things. I think that a lot of the industries here know naman what can be outsourced to AI. Even in the music industry, we already know what's boring for us. Or in the legal industry, we know what can easily be done by someone other than us. That's very, very routine, very, very black and white. So I think the future of the music industry in general is a very bright one. I think it can't be helped that some people will use it for bad, that people will use other people's voice or likeness and then use AI to generate songs out of them and things like that. But there's also so much avenue for good as well. And I feel like so much of our systems can just really be made more efficiently. And I feel like for people who've always wanted to try music, but have not had the resources, AI is such a big help. If you can sing, but you don't have a beat, if you can make beats, but you don't have a singer, if you have trouble songwriting, just a little bit, things like that. So I feel like I'm excited for what's to come in terms of AI and the music industry.
So I think it's a good thing na music has definitely become more accessible. Not just that, parang more people are more cautious in terms of what's ethical, especially for creatives. Kasi I think we're becoming a generation full of creatives with the accessibility of editing soft like apps, especially social media na TikTok. Everyone has a TikTok. Everyone's doing some form of creation. So, mas careful tayo in terms of what are the do's and don'ts of that. And going back to the topic of music, syempre, this is something na carefully, like, naturally embedded in each of us, yung appreciation natin of music and different forms of music, whether that be K-pop, OPM, whatever that definition may be. It's something now widely appreciated and widely consumed. So, thank you so much, Miss Bob Ecarma, for joining us and, in a way, enlightening us to know more about music and law and yung tangents, all the different tangents that we were able to talk about in this episode. Wait, a closing question to wrap things up, which is weird na ngayon lang natin i-ask. Why Bob?
Oh.
Nakalimutan natin i-ask.
So, the two answers. The answer I tell everyone when pag ayoko na ipahaba yung convo, it's always, I was named that after my hair. Which is true naman. I've always, for the most part, not always, but I'm really known to have a bob cut. People just call me Bob. But the actual origin story of Bob was because I was such a big fan of My Chemical Romance. I started to get into music. The drummer's name is Bob Breyer. So he's been such a big inspiration in my life because I started drumming because of him, and then that just led to everything else happening after. So it's just Bob, and it's just always been Bob, and I guess it just stuck talaga.
It's the branding.
It's the brand. It is my brand.
Anything you want to plug pala here?
Follow me on social media.
The comeback of the YouTube channel.
Oh, please no. Charot. Let's see. If sponsor ako ng Logitech. Wow. But yeah, do follow me on Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, ano pa ba, LinkedIn, other YouTube, whatever you wanna use, TikTok, things like that. It's at Bob Ecarma, at BOBECARMA on social media. That's it.
So, thank you so much for joining us here at Babble Station. Don't forget to tune in at our social media accounts at Babble with us on Instagram and Babble on Facebook.
See you on the next episode, guys. Bye.
Bye.